Hi there. My name is Jeff Malberg. I directed the documentary Marwencol. It's playing at South by Southwest, and Brian's going to ask me some questions.
Now, first off, as I said before, really enjoyed it. Beautiful, beautiful film, beautiful subject too. So, how was your reaction for the first screening for the film?
Chris, my wife and I were comparing notes last night afterwards, and it was everything we hoped it would be. Like, it's weird. You sit in a room, you pretend it's a movie, and it's just footage, and you're on your home computer in your bedroom for years, right? And they were picking up everything we were putting down, and it was really solid. It just felt so good to and the reason is not because, the reason was because it was about them understanding Mark, and there were certain points where you really realized that they were getting him and that they were laughing along with him, and that laugh was sort of like one of understanding. Maybe they weren't in the same predicament that he was in, but they understood him and they were embracing him and making this kind of movie about somebody that you like and that you're trying to understand the whole time. I don't know how you could feel any better than seeing that reaction, And then the Q&A was great. I mean, I find it a really interesting subject to talk about, so it was great to hear those questions. And
Now, to audiences that would be completely unfamiliar with the film right away, what would you say, about it? I mean, it's a the subject itself is, like I said, gorgeous. The photography, the art in it. But, I mean, at its core, what would you say Marwencol is?
I would say it's the story of someone who is trying to find themselves and trying to rebuild their life and trying to figure out who they are. And because of who Mark is and because of the relationship I ended up having with him, I think one of the fun things in the movie is getting to understand somebody on somewhat of a deep level as they toy with things in their mind and as they decide. Mark was somebody whose whole life was erased, and he had a chance, like people frankly dream of having a chance. I know I have, I'm sure a lot of people have, of wow, I've really screwed this up. Can I start over? And in Mark's case, unfortunately, with his attack, he had to do that, right? So, to me, it's the story of somebody who's trying to find their way back into the world and trying to find what they value. I mean, that sounds heady, but it's that's the fun part of these kind of screenings, is because you get to look back at something. I would never want to make a movie where you stated that, because what's the fun of that? You know what I mean? You want to have an experience that's holistic, and you want to feel it. You know what I mean? So, almost me saying that, I don't want people to get the wrong impression, but at the core, I think that's ultimately 3 days down the line after viewing it, you may feel that way. And that's, to me, a good feeling, and that's where doc is powerful, is you get to meet someone, and maybe you realize, oh, shoot, this guy's way braver than I thought. This guy's he did a better job than I would. And, how did I think about him before I really knew him? And how do I think about him now? And am I doing that to anybody else in my life? So, I mean, that's a very powerful doc technique that I think people use, and probably maybe don't even I know I didn't identify it when I was making it, but looking back on it now, that's what it is to me.
Now, when shooting a doc, I mean, it's pretty easy to become emotionally, attached to your subject.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Probably one of the most tense filled moments of the film for me was when he was constantly second guessing himself before the art show.
Sure.
I mean, what was that like for you? I mean, how did you feel?
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, that was I felt the same way. I mean, I felt here's somebody who's really struggling with how they want to present themselves to the world. And I understood that to some degree. I felt honored that he was willing to share that with me. I think Mark's a real artist in the sense that once he kind of glommed onto what I was trying to do, he trusted me and he gave it, and it was then my responsibility to give it back to him, and to show him in a light that was both kind but also truthful, you know. And so yeah, that was a tough time, but I think you start shooting and you realize, hey, there's something interesting there. I want to follow that. You know what I mean? And as we got to know each other, and we're friends now. I mean, I consider Mark a true friend, and he does me. And you know, for him to share that, not just with me, but knowing I was going to share it with the rest of the world, that's a really giving thing on his part. And I'm glad that people are accepting that. You know?
Now, I mean, this probably changed a lot through the feature. What were you aiming for at the beginning,
Yeah.
and what really did it turn into?
I'd started as a short. I usually work as an editor, and I wanted to kind of stretch a different set of muscles and try directing. And I thought, okay, I'll do a short, you know. And right about that time, you know, it's weird once you sort of keep your eyes open, like it sort of appears sometimes maybe. And I subscribed to Asopus, and because I always thought it was a cool magazine, and I saw these photos, and I'm like, oh, there's my short, you know. So it's clearly a wonderful 10-minute short. You know, he was beat up, and then now he plays with dolls, and you know, the doll gets beaten up, and oh wow, isn't that clever and wonderful? So, you know, in full disclosure, I think I started a little more like thinking I knew what I was doing, you know, and then as the situation presented itself to me, I became aware that not only would that not maybe properly represent Mark's full story, but I had a lot of learning to do myself. You know, and so, yeah, it started off very simple, and as I started filming, I realized there were layers there and layers there, and it was my job to kind of figure them out, you know, and to present them back once I had. So.
Now, what is your hope for audiences, like, when they see Mark's story?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, if you had to, like, put a, you know, like a label on it, like, as far as, like, what Marwencol says to its audience,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how would you describe that?
What Marwencol says to the audience. I mean, I think it's about, you know, you play around with posters, right? And you play around with taglines. And to me, the tagline that comes closest that we've thought of is, you know, if you're not accepted in the real world, create your own, you know? And, like, I think that there is this sort of alt kind of element to it in terms of, you know, this sort of avatar-ish idea of being someone else, you know, and alternate realities, and where you can find joy, and is it as valid to find joy in an imaginary world as it is in a real world, you know?
Now, with you being friends with Mark, I'm just curious, like, do you think it's more of, and in the traditional sense of the word, therapy, like really helping him?
Right.
Or do you think it's, you know, just, is it more an escape that, you know, he really just needs?
It's a good question. I don't know. I ask myself that question a lot, you know, and Mark knows that, and we've talked about that. I don't know, but it's a really good question, and I think you don't try and wrap up all the answers in a documentary, and I hope that when people see that film, they ask themselves that same thing.
Well, I think, you know, and really, like, there are few docs that really do this, because it's always like, oh, let me put a funny, you know, like, feel on this or something, but yours is very genuine.
Sure.
And like I said, you fall in love with his art, you know.
Yeah.
He just comes off as this guy that, like you said, got a second chance and really embraced it. And, you know, I mean, like, just if you were sitting down, like, if you were ready to introduce your film and, you know, tell the world, you know, like, I want you to see this, like, what is the one thing you want audiences to walk away with?
One thing I want them to walk away with. Just appreciation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, maybe understanding someone that you might initially dismiss, and that you now, having known him a little better 83 minutes later, that you might appreciate a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know, because that's what and I'm not trying to preach, because that's what I walked away with. And I wanted to make the experience holistic to how I've experienced it. I'm not some moralizing guy. You know what I mean? I wanted to have the same feel that Mark gave me. Would you make this kind of movie about somebody who was a jerk? No. To some degree, the format has to fit the subject. And Mark, as a subject and as a person, brings it, and so deep, and so, all the stuff that I wanted the film to do the same, because I think that those things should kind of be tied in together, So, I just hope that they come away with some appreciation for Mark and what a brave and talented person he really is.
Now, last question for you. You get a lot of questions as far as these press days go.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to open the floor to you. What's one thing that you haven't gotten to say about the film that, you just really like to put out there?
Actually, all the stuff we just talked about is all the stuff I wanted to get out there, because that's how I feel about it. I hope people, when you make a documentary, I found out, having done one, that maybe it's a different experience than making a narrative. You're really putting a frame around something. And that subject, I happened to find a subject that I ended up, falling in love with as a subject, like somebody that I could really respect. And that if you're going to go to the trouble to make a doc, make sure it's a subject that you truly care about and that you want to know more about, and that maybe all the answers aren't there right away, because then the experience of making it is just as valuable as any reception you might ever get, because it becomes this home movie of your experience. It becomes, I showed the film to Mark a couple weeks ago when I was in Rough Cut, and a couple months ago. It seemed like a couple weeks ago, but a couple months ago, like late January. And I was just ready to lock, and I'm like, I gotta go show Mark. So I went and showed him, and we talked about it, and we both realized it was sort of this like memento of what we'd experienced together. And like, how does it get better than that? And if you can turn it back into a movie and show it to other people, to me, that's the new doc, is that, because now we have the power, now we got the cameras, now we got and it doesn't cost that much, So, what am I trying to tell people? Just that if you're going to go to the trouble to make a documentary, it's hard work. But if you choose your subject wisely, it is the most rewarding experience you could have ever.
Awesome. Well, like I said, we really enjoyed it, and wish the best of you for the fest.
Yeah, well, thanks, man.
Thank you for sitting with us.
Yeah, and thanks for talking.